Speaking two languages does not just make you better at communication. It physically rewires your brain in ways that scientists are still struggling to fully explain. People who speak two or more languages show measurably different brain structure, stronger cognitive abilities, and according to one landmark study, a delay in Alzheimer's symptoms by an average of 4 to 5 years compared to monolinguals. That is not a small difference. That is years of your life, your memories, your identity, preserved. So what is actually happening inside a bilingual brain? Why does juggling two languages create such dramatic neurological changes? In the next 10 minutes, you are going to discover what decades of neuroscience research have revealed about bilingualism, the brain regions it transforms, and the one finding that completely upended what scientists thought they knew about cognitive decline. Some of what you are about to hear will surprise you. Some of it might change how you think about learning a language entirely. To understand what bilingualism does to the brain, you first need to understand how the brain handles language at all. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed language lived in two specific regions of the left hemisphere. Broca's area, located near the front of the brain, was thought to handle speech production and grammar. Wernicke's area, toward the back, was considered the home of language comprehension. Damage either one, and language ability would break down in predictable ways. This model was neat, simple, and mostly wrong. Modern neuroimaging technology, particularly functional MRI, or fMRI, has revealed that language processing is far more distributed across the brain than anyone imagined. It involves networks stretching across both hemispheres, connecting areas responsible for memory, attention, motor control, and executive function. And when a person speaks two languages, those networks become more extensive, more densely connected, and more efficient. The brain is not carrying extra weight. It is building extra infrastructure. Researchers at York University in Canada, led by psychologist Ellen Białystok, have spent decades investigating what they call the bilingual advantage. Their research showed that bilingual individuals consistently outperform monolinguals on tasks requiring executive function, the set of cognitive skills that includes attention, task switching, and inhibitory control. This makes intuitive sense once you understand what a bilingual brain is doing every single moment of every single day. Here is something most people never consider. When a bilingual person speaks, both of their languages are active at the same time. Always. Even when you are only speaking one language, your other language is running in the background, competing for attention, constantly being suppressed. Your brain has to manage this constant competition, selecting the right words from the right language while actively holding back the other. This is not an occasional workout. This is a full-time neurological exercise happening continuously. That constant mental juggling strengthens a region called the anterior cingulate cortex, which plays a central role in conflict monitoring and attention management. It also thickens the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center for decision-making and impulse control. Studies using diffusion tensor imaging, a technique that maps white matter pathways, have found that bilinguals show greater structural integrity in the white matter connecting these regions. More connections, stronger connections, faster signal transmission. But here's what nobody talks about. The bilingual brain does not just become stronger in language areas. It becomes more resistant to damage overall. When disease or injury destroys one pathway, bilingual brains are more likely to have redundant pathways that can compensate. This is called cognitive reserve, and it is one of the most powerful protective factors known to neuroscience. Think of it like this. A city with one bridge. Connecting two sides is vulnerable. Destroy that bridge and the city is cut off. A city with 10 bridges can lose several and still function. Bilingualism builds more bridges. This brings us back to that Alzheimer's finding, because it deserves much more than a passing mention. In a 2010 study published in the journal Neuropsychology, researchers examined hundreds of patients diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. What they found stunned the scientific community. Bilingual patients were showing up with the same level of brain damage as monolingual patients, but they were not exhibiting the same symptoms. Their cognitive function was significantly better despite equivalent pathology. The diagnosis itself was coming in average of 4 to 5 years later in bilingual individuals. Let that land for a second. Their brains were physically damaged to the same degree. The disease had progressed equally far. But the bilingual patients were still functioning better because their brains had built enough extra capacity to compensate for the damage. The language learning had not prevented the disease. It had given the brain enough reserve to fight back longer and harder. What is particularly fascinating is that these benefits are not exclusive to people who grew up speaking two languages from birth. Subsequent research has examined what happens when adults learn a second language later in life, and the results are genuinely encouraging. A 2012 study from the University of Edinburgh tracked over 1,000 participants over several decades and found that individuals who learned a second language after childhood still showed cognitive advantages compared to monolinguals. The brain retains enough plasticity that deliberate language learning at almost any age can produce measurable structural changes. However, and this is an important distinction, the degree of benefit does appear to scale with the intensity and consistency of bilingual use. Someone who studied French in high school and barely uses it will not show the same neurological changes as someone who actively switches between two languages daily. The brain responds to genuine challenge and regular use. Passive familiarity with a language is not enough to drive the kind of structural change we have been discussing. You have to actually use it. The brain only invests in infrastructure it needs. So what does actual bilingual language use look like in the brain in real time? Neuroimaging studies have given us some remarkable windows into this process. When a proficient bilingual person is asked to name an object in one of their languages, fMRI scans show activation patterns that are distinct from what happens in a monolingual brain performing the same task. The bilingual brain shows greater bilateral activation, meaning both hemispheres are more involved. It also shows greater activation in the right frontal regions associated with cognitive control, even when the task itself is straightforward. What this tells us is that even routine language use in a bilingual person requires more cognitive coordination than the equivalent task in a monolingual person. Not because bilinguals are worse at language, but because they are managing more. The right hemisphere in particular appears to play a larger supporting role in bilinguals, which may be part of why their brains are more resilient. If the dominant left hemisphere is damaged, the right has already been developed and strengthened and is ready to take over a larger share of the work. There is also growing evidence that bilingualism influences memory systems in nuanced ways. Episodic memories, the memories of specific events and experiences, are often encoded differently depending on which language was active when the memory was formed. Bilingual individuals sometimes report that memories from childhood feel more vivid when recalled in the language they were using at the time. This is not just nostalgia. It reflects how deeply language is woven into the neural architecture of memory encoding and retrieval. The practical implications of all this research are significant. For parents deciding whether to raise children in multiple languages, the science is unambiguous. Bilingual children do not suffer the cognitive confusion that earlier researchers feared. Those concerns have been thoroughly debunked. Instead, they gain measurable advantages in attention, mental flexibility, and long-term brain health. For adults considering whether it is worth investing time in language learning, the neurological evidence offers a compelling argument that goes far beyond cultural enrichment or career opportunity. You are quite literally investing in the long-term health of your brain. And for society more broadly, as populations age and dementia rates climb, the finding that something as accessible as learning a language can meaningfully delay cognitive decline carries enormous implications for public health. Language learning is not a pharmaceutical intervention with side effects and costs. Before you go, if you learned something valuable today, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Lang Bridge for a brand new video every single day. We will see you in the next one.